Welcome to Issues That Matter. My guest today is Alan Collins. Alan is the founder of Student Loan Justice, and Alan is running for president. So tell us a little bit about your campaign. How's
Well,
it
you know,
going?
I became so frustrated with both parties on the student loan issue over the 20 years that I've been fighting for student loan justice. I decided I'd just throw my hat in the ring by way of as a means to put pressure on both parties. You know,
Mm.
rhetoric radically different from each side, but both of them are just fake. Both the D's and the R's guarantee the perpetuation of a predatory lending program, which is the student loan. I call it the scam. So I threw my hat in the ring. That's, of course, my number one issue is canceling and replacing the student loan system. Holding the colleges accountable, by the way, it's kind of a big thing. And beyond that, I think we need to tax the wealthiest in this country at post-World War II levels. We do need to secure the border. I'm not neither a D or an R. I'm going to both sides on various issues. We do need to
Mhm.
stand up to China, but taxing the wealthy, uh, stabilizing Medicare, Social Security, and of course student loans. Those are my top tier issues.
So from the time that we started talking up until now, has the number of borrowers decreased?
No, the number of borrowers has actually increased. It steadily increases over time because, you know, Cynthia, nobody is able to pay off their loans today. Even before COVID, 85% of all borrowers had increasing balances. So very few people are able to pay their way out of this loan program. So the number of borrowers is higher, and the amount of the size of the debt is just exploding right now. The federal student loans alone, I think we're at probably a little more than $1.7 trillion right now, which is just outrageous.
But in the scheme of things, with the amount of money that we're indebted, 1.7 doesn't seem like that much.
Well, if you're one of the 44 million borrowers and you originally borrowed, you know, $20,000 and today, and you've repaid probably at least that, and you owe 45 or 50 or 70 or maybe even $100,000, which is very common. It's a pretty big deal. And, you
Mm.
know, having the weight of this immortal predatory loan, big government, I would say, loan scam hanging around your neck your entire life, it's a big deal. My best guess is that there are about 40 million people who will lose sleep tonight about their student loans. And these people vote, by the way, and both parties. Like I said, the Democrats are faking it. The Republicans are just evil, quite frankly. Uh,
So you're running as a write-in,
that's
and
right.
and I you're not able to travel from state to state with a big entourage, are you?
No, none of that. Absolutely none of that. I'm a strictly independent write-in candidate. I think that's a feature rather than a bug. I think people need to really take some pride in bringing their pen to the polls and forcing some analog into these increasingly digital elections. So I'm trying to turn a lemon into a rose. Um, so I won't be on the ballot, but everybody and anybody can write me in, and those votes will count in about 41 states. They won't count in 9 states, which is the equivalent electoral voting power of the state of California. So that's not great. That's okay.
Mm.
In most states, people writing me in, those votes absolutely will count.
So how has the press been treating you?
The press has almost totally ignored me. I got some nice shout outs from some journalist friends of mine on Twitter, Matt Taibbi and others. A few celebrity nods from people like John Cusack. But the press is highly uninterested in covering third party or independent candidates. And it's not just me, it's even RFK, who actually I think has a shot. He's getting almost summarily ignored by the mainstream media, certainly CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Very rare that you'll see him. You'll essentially never see Jill Stein on the major networks. And I'm obviously below those two people in stature and fame and so on and so forth. So the media has not been friendly, but I'm not counting on the media, Cynthia. From day one, I assumed that the media we would not exist in the media, and that's fine. When there's 40 million student loan borrowers out there who are losing sleep at night, the grassroots hopefully and should be enough. If even a third of those people were inspired enough by my campaign to go and write my name in, that's 10, 15 million votes. That is by far and away enough electoral power to get either or both the Democrats and the Republicans to hopefully solve the student loan problem before the election. So at a minimum, they could return bankruptcy rights to the loans today. But quite frankly, most of the loans at this point really need to be and will be canceled ultimately. So I'm
So,
hoping that we can solve this problem just through the pressure of my campaign before the election.
so the two major candidates, which are Trump and Harris. Has Donald Trump talked about the student loan debt crisis at all?
Donald Trump hasn't mentioned students and loans in the same sentence since he was president, actually,
Mhm.
during the COVID repayment pause, etc. So he's essentially nowhere on the issue. Kamala Harris, and this really bothers me. The Democrats were supposed to be on our side. Kamala Harris has not, and she's been the presumptive nominee for 2 weeks now. She has not even put a campaign agenda of any kind on her website as of today's date. And quite frankly, I'm wondering if they're not going to just put that off until the 11th hour in this election season. We've only got 3 months to go. And, I only hear Kamala or Trump, for that matter, talking about maybe 3 issues or so. And they're all cultural issues. They're not financial, economic issues. Very rarely do you hear Kamala talking about taxing the wealthy. Of course, Donald Trump wants to cut taxes, which is on the wealthy, which is just outrageous and obscene given the debt of this country. But I think both parties have outlived their usefulness, Cynthia. I think they are now completely captured by the wealthy elite. And that's certainly, Donald Trump is arguably wealthy elite, definitely wealthy. Kamala Harris is completely under the spell of very wealthy families, primarily in the San Francisco area. And
Mhm.
I talked about that on previous podcasts. And
Mhm.
interestingly, at least one of the families that is her benefactor, her patron, almost single-handedly stopped student loan cancellation by executive order. So I feel particularly strong sort of resentment from what we've seen so far from the Democrats and, quite frankly, Joe Biden before Kamala, but now with Kamala as well.
So, Harris has not put anything on her website about the student loan debt crisis.
About any issue, go to kamalaharris.com. Like, typically you'll see an issue section on these websites, and that's usually from before the primaries even. Go to Kamala Harris's website, nothing, not on any issue. There's a big thing to donate, and that's all that we've seen, and hopefully that will change. But this seems to be the way of politics today, Cynthia. Both parties have just fallen into these culture wars, which, quite frankly, the wealthiest in this country love, because whichever way a culture war issue goes, it doesn't hurt the financial standing and prospects of the wealthy elite. It only improves or solidifies their financial position. And I think that's what's really going on with this presidential election, Cynthia. It's just been completely sort of child-proofed
Mm. So there's 44 million people that have student debt. Don't they feel any pressure from them to take a position?
Well, they certainly should, and I include both parties in that. The Republicans absolutely should be aware that more than half, over half of student loan borrowers are either Republican or independent. And given that 40 of those 44 million people are freaking out, we're never going to be able to repay their loans. They need to pay attention to these people. You know, all the Republicans are doing right now is alienating and insulting these people. And all the Democrats are doing is stringing, and again, I can also validly say that more than half of student loan borrowers are also independent or Democratic. That's both things are true at the same time because the independents. Um, the Democrats are just stringing us along with false promises. You know, it's a rerun of 2020 where Joe Biden was promising cancellation. The Democrats were promising the return of bankruptcy rights. Um, you know, this time around, the DNC convention is later this month. I
Mm-hmm.
really don't even think that the Democrats are going to include the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans in their party's agenda. I hope I'm wrong, but you know, the Democrats have just become totally fake, duplicitous, I would say fraudulent, making false promises on this issue even since 2020. It's terrible.
Did you
Student loan
expect
borrowers
this?
have no party. Sorry.
Did you expect this?
I mean, no. I mean, the lending right now, as we speak, my best estimate is that 86% of all student loan borrowers are not making payments on their loans. This is 41 million people. That's too big to ignore. I expected that by now. I mean, the lending system, for all intents, is catastrophically failed. It's finished. And I fully expected a few years ago that eventually, like right around now, one party or the other, or maybe both, would finally sort of capitulate, quit fighting for the Department of Education in this loan scam, and just tell the truth and say, yep, we got it wrong on student loans. It's the whole thing. The whole thing's got to go. We've got to replace the whole thing. It's just terminally failed at this point. But you know, the people in Washington never cease to break new records when it comes to political cowardice and lack of integrity, dishonesty, and just a simple inability to tell the simple truth.
So had Donald Trump put anything on his website about the student loan crisis?
No, I actually haven't checked, but I am assuming no. That's a very good question. I should check. I would bet a dollar to a dime that no, there's nothing on Donald Trump's website about student loans. To his credit, he hasn't said anything terrible about student loan borrowers like we see the rest of the Republicans doing, saying, why should my taxpayers pay for some blue-haired young liberal to fund her Harvard education? Just nonsense like that. It's a complete fake argument, by the way. The people have repaid their student loans. The federal government has made a profit, a massive profit on this lending scam. Every nickel could be canceled and the taxpayer would be breaking about even. But we haven't heard Donald Trump say anything really terrible, like most of the rest of his party. In fact, in 2015, before he ran for president, Donald Trump was sounding very much like me and my group. He was saying, why is the government making a profit on student loans? That makes no sense. And maybe I could also say, and I'm no Donald Trump fan, don't get me wrong, but also to his credit, he was actually the first president to cancel student loans broadly by executive order. He did it twice. He did it once for disabled veterans before the pandemic, and then he did it for everybody with the first repayment pause. So Donald Trump actually broke some very new ground on fixing the student loan program. But you know, read Project 2025 and whatever Donald Trump says, he doesn't really care about student loans. He doesn't even want to talk about student loans. And as president, besides those two things I just mentioned, which he was kind of forced into, certainly the second thing, he has no real interest in making any huge changes to the student loan program.
But with over 40 million people burdened by this, that's enough to swing an election. I don't
It's,
understand.
it's well more than enough to massively swing any election.
Mhm.
If you wonder why the red wave never happened in the midterms 2022, it's because of student loans. With 3 million or 2.8 million people in Georgia freaking out about their student loans, and hearing the Republicans just repeatedly, stab this ice pick in our eye with their insults and their finger wagging and their lies about how cancellation costs the taxpayers, and Joe Plumber has to pay $2,000 more because Biden canceled student loans. That is not winning them any votes. It is losing them elections. And honestly, Cynthia, I predict that unless the Republicans come around and at a minimum call for the return of bankruptcy rights, or maybe even make that happen through Congress before the election, I see 0% chance that Donald Trump can win this election. And he absolutely will lose. I predict if the Republicans don't at a minimum return bankruptcy rights to student loans. So save this for posterity. I think I'm going to be saying I told you so in a few months. Hopefully not. Hopefully the Republicans will come around.
But Kamala Harris hasn't uh, done anything for you.
I couldn't agree with you more. The Democrats are absolutely, completely faking it. It's a good cop, bad cop thing. But the rhetoric from the Democrats sounds pretty good. They're doing, and they are, at least on paper, they are actually canceling some loans. But the game the Democrats are playing is to cancel as few loans as possible and make a huge deal about every little tranche that they do. Like last week, Joe Biden, all the headlines were like, Joe Biden cancels $1.2 billion in student loans. Wow. Well, what they didn't tell you is that during that very same week, around $3.5 billion in interest was created out of thin air and added to the student loan portfolio.
Wow.
So the Democrats are playing a very cynical game, and it's very clever, very smart. Average Joe voter with student loans, he'll vote for the Democrat unless they know about my campaign. So I think the Democrats are playing the Republicans like a fiddle on this issue.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I wrote an article maybe a month ago titled "Biden's Trickery, Republicans' Idiocy on the Student Loan Issue."
But
Like, I
Biden
don't
was
know what
the,
the Republicans are thinking. Sorry.
but Biden was the architect of this whole
I
thing.
know. The cruel ironies of this are never ending. Joe Biden, more than any other living, serving politician, deserves more credit than anyone on earth for the student loan scam. He was a surprisingly key guy in the 1970s when bankruptcy rights were first removed from the loans. He
Mhm.
was the key guy when bankruptcy rights were removed from private student loans, 2005. Like, this is exactly the guy who we did not want winning the presidency in 2020. His baggage, I mean, he owns this problem. But yet the Democrats are, at the rate things are going, barring any huge, coming around, new leaf turning over activities from the Republicans. The Republicans are just going to get their clock cleaned by the Democrats.
You think so?
Oh, I know so. There's no doubt in my mind. You know, um, people who went to college, aka student loan borrowers, they vote in a far higher percentage than the general population. Um, you know, with
But
I mean, just
if neither Trump or Harris is talking about this, why do you think that the majority of people who vote, who might have student debt, why do you think they're going to vote for Harris?
because the rhetoric from the Democrats sounds great. You listen to the Republicans, they're like, why should my tax dollars pay for your college and pay your loans and don't be a deadbeat? And then you
Uh-huh.
listen to the Democrats, they're like, oh, we care about you. We want to cancel your loans, but the Republicans keep fighting us on it, which is nonsense. The whole thing is just nonsense. Democrats have no real desire or intentions of canceling any more loans than they need to, but people don't know that truth. People know what they see on TV. And, the Republicans have essentially abandoned that entire voting bloc. And people don't realize, more, as I said, more than half of all student loan borrowers are either Republican or independent. Well over half of them are over the age of 35. And I think older people tend to be a little more conservative. The worst hurt states, it's not California or Massachusetts or, Washington State or Oregon. The worst hurt states are Texas, North and South Carolina, Georgia is the worst, Alabama, the entire South, Missouri. Did I say Florida, Oklahoma, Tennessee, the entire South, from Missouri to Texas, from Virginia to Florida, and everything in between? Those are the worst hurt states. And, these people in most of those states, these people owe more than their entire state budget in student loan debt owed to the Department of Education. So why are the Republicans fighting loan cancellation and essentially fighting for the Department of Education and the colleges? The Republicans say they want to close down the Department of Education, but then here they are fighting tooth and nail, about to fall on their sword for the Department of Education's cash cow, their loan scam. So the
So,
hypocrisy is just mind-numbing from the Republicans.
so how do you get these two candidates to speak about the issue? I think
Well,
that's the bottom line.
the only way that I can think of to do that is by doing exactly what I'm doing, Cynthia. At least on paper, Student Loan Justice, our group, is the largest, certainly the oldest, but even the largest collection of student loan borrowers in the country. We've got about 1.3 or 4 million members, and we carry a great voice when we all coalesce together and start rowing in the same direction. I think my campaign really could put some very serious pressure on both sides. And so that's the only thing that I can think of that might make that happen. So if you have student loans out there, you better start pushing for my campaign, promoting my campaign everywhere you can. Whoever you ultimately vote for, whatever you think of my chances, that's not the point. The point is to put pressure on both parties. That's what my campaign does. And barring that, I don't see any hope, Cynthia. I think both parties are going to completely fake it all the way through the election, and they're going to forget about us after the election's over with, like they did in 2020.
Okay, so if they forget about you guys, there's got to be a breaking point, right?
We've already reached that breaking point, Cynthia. As I said, even before the pandemic, around 58% of student loan borrowers were not making payments. Now that the payments have resumed after the repayment pause, 86% of the people, have not resumed paying on their loans. They're done. They're finished. Student loans are illegitimate to them, and therefore, student loans really, Cynthia, are illegitimate. When only 14% of the people are making payments, what are we even talking about here? We're talking about a failed loan scam that at this point exists only in the minds of small number of people in Washington, D.C., and Wall Street, and maybe the media. But the people have spoken with their inaction, I guess. The lending system is dead. It's a dead man walking. People in Washington apparently haven't gotten the memo yet, but that's the reality.
So if they haven't gotten the memo yet, when do you think they're going to get it?
It's hard to say, Cynthia. I keep hoping and trusting and having some faith that the good, honest people with backbones in Washington, D.C. will and the media, if not them, will finally start telling the truth about this. But, I have yet to see any real truth come out from either politicians or the media about this failed loan program for, I don't know, probably 3-4 years. Something's really changed in the media, Cynthia. The media no longer is in the business of reporting relevant, significant, important news. They're in the business of working for their wealthy funders and maybe their sponsors who pay their bills. And, you know, they have decided what's important, and what they've decided that is important is not student loans.
So how long has that been? How long has that been? I mean, when did they start doing this?
20 years ago, having done no more than maybe a few months worth of research, I took my stuff to the very first reporter I contacted, Bethany McLean. I brought my research to her, and within, well, it took quite a long time, like 6, 8, 9 months, maybe even a year. But eventually, Bethany published a great cover story about student loans in Fortune magazine. And that very quickly escalated to a top story on 60 Minutes. And after that, until roughly, I'm going to say about 2012, pretty much every bit of research that I did, reporters would be chomping at the bit to report it. Breaking stories in the media was never hard at all. In fact, it was quite easy, assuming you had something that was relevant news and important. Today, I don't even bother to send my research out to reporters these days, almost at all, because they're just not interested anymore. They've got their agenda, and their agenda is not the people's agenda. It is not. The truth is not important to them. What's important is massaging, spinning, what the facts are to bend to whatever motive they've got in mind. So it's a pretty scary media landscape right now. I don't know if it's scary or hilarious or disgusting. It makes me want to vomit. But it is what it is. And people can't trust the media, and people need to seek out their own. People need to seek out independent journalists. People smell bullshit, and they can smell all the bullshit, pardon my French, coming from the mainstream media, and even the not so mainstream media. Also, the fatally, terminally biased media, which includes the mainstream media these days. There's so much bad information out there. I can only hope that people take a little bit of time and try and sniff out the objective truth tellers for themselves, because you're not going to find them on MSNBC or CNN. They're going to talk only about 4 or 5 issues they feel are important. Hard news reporting, hard news journalism is almost dead today.
What about Fox?
Terrible. Fox is just another corporate shill. Yeah, they're on the other side of the DR divide, but it's the same. They pick their issues, and they sugarcoat, gloss over whatever they don't like, or just ignore what doesn't work for them, and they promote whatever does work for them. So that doesn't the knowledge needs of the citizens, like what the citizens need to know, like basic stuff, doesn't even factor in anymore.
Wow. Wow. So, if somebody wants to get involved in your campaign, if they want to contribute or whatever, give your information out.
Yeah, we're the only game going in town, guys. No matter what you think, please come to my website, Collings for President. Hopefully, my name appears on the live stream here. My last name for president.com. Do anything you can do to support my campaign. Spreading the word about my campaign to every student loan borrower is the number one, by far and away, the most important thing that anybody can be doing.
So you have some substantive material on your website.
Oh, very, very substantive. I talk about more than just student loans. I lay out campaign agendas for many issues, taxing the wealthy, dealing with China, student loans, obviously, the border. I'm about to add my bit on healthcare, Social Security. But there's a lot there, and a lot to chew on. But more than anything, just tell everybody you know with student loans about my campaign. If everybody with student loans even knew about my campaign, I think that would guarantee us a couple million votes for sure.
So, you and I have been talking about student loans for years. Is the problem of medical indebtedness increasing also?
I think it's increasing in direct proportion to the size of the healthcare industry. Yeah, that's true. The key difference between, and the reason that we don't look at other types of debt besides student loan debt, is that every other type of debt, including medical debt, have constitutional bankruptcy rights associated with
Okay.
them. Nobody wants to file bankruptcy. It's a terrible thing. Medical debt is the leading cause of bankruptcies in this country today, but at least they've got those protections. So there's not there's not the same just glaring, blatant injustice with medical debt as there is with student loan debt. Big problem,
Okay.
though. Make no mistake, big problem.
Alan, we'll talk again as the election evolves. So you've been listening to Alan Collins, um, founder of Student Loan Justice. I'm Cynthia Pula. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Alan. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.